The front office smelled like paper, coffee, and something faintly medicinal. Nia Robinson stood at the counter with both hands resting on the edge, fingers curled slightly inward the way she did when she was trying to stay calm. The school bell had rung 10 minutes ago, and the hallway outside was already quiet. Students in class, doors closed, the day moving forward without her. Nia, black, early 30s, meticulous by habit, held a thin folder against her chest. Inside it were forms she'd filled out twice, signatures she'd chased down, and a transfer request she'd submitted 3 weeks ago. This was supposed to be the last step. Behind the counter sat Margaret Lewis, the school secretary. White, late 50s, glasses perched low on her nose, nails tapping against a keyboard with practiced impatience. Margaret didn't look up. "I'm here about a transfer request," Nia said politely. "For my daughter, Kayla Robinson." Margaret sighed softly, still typing. "Transfers are handled by the district." "I know," Nia replied. "They approved it. I was told to bring the confirmation here." Margaret stopped typing. Slowly, she looked up and adjusted her glasses, eyes scanning Nia in a way that felt more evaluative than curious. "What grade?" she asked. "Third," Nia said. Margaret pursed her lips. "We're past the enrollment window." Nia blinked. The district said the request was processed before the deadline. Margaret shook her head. "If it didn't hit our system before Friday at noon, it's not valid." Nia opened the folder and slid a printed email across the counter. This was submitted Thursday morning. Margaret glanced at it briefly, then pushed it back without reading past the first line. "Our system is what matters," she said, "and I don't see it." Nia felt a familiar tightening in her chest. "Could you check again?" Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Honey, I've been doing this for 25 years. The word honey landed wrong. "I understand," Nia said carefully, "but the district told me it was approved." Margaret folded her hands. "Then the district made a mistake." Nia frowned. "So what happens now?" Margaret shrugged. "Kayla stays where she is. We don't do midterm transfers anymore." "That wasn't what I was told," Nia said. Margaret smiled thinly. "Parents get told a lot of things." The smile stayed, but it wasn't kind. Nia took a breath. "My daughter was reassigned because of safety concerns. This transfer wasn't optional." Margaret's expression cooled. "Ma'am, if it's not in our system, it doesn't exist." Nia stared at her. She thought of Kayla sitting in a classroom where she didn't feel safe. Thought of the meetings, the emails, the promises. Thought of how carefully she'd followed every instruction because she'd learned the hard way what happened when you didn't. "I followed every step," Nia said quietly. Margaret's fingers returned to the keyboard. "Then you'll have to wait until next semester." Nia looked down at the folder in her hands. Then she opened it again. This time she didn't pull out the approval letter. She pulled out the confirmation page, the one Margaret hadn't seen yet. At the bottom of the page, in small but unmistakable print, was a line most people overlooked. Enrollment timestamp, Thursday, 10:14. AM. Nia slid the page across the counter. "Before you tell me it doesn't exist," she said evenly, "can you explain this?" Margaret's fingers froze above the keys, and for the first time since Nia walked into the office, the secretary leaned forward. Not dismissive now, not confident, but suddenly very interested in the exact moment the system said yes. Margaret stared at the page longer than she needed to. The office felt quieter now, as if even the hum of the fluorescent lights had lowered itself out of respect for the moment. Nia watched the secretary's eyes move from the bolded heading down to the timestamp, then back up again, her lips pressing together. "That's a district-generated document," Margaret said finally. "Yes," Nia replied. "That you told me to bring." Margaret picked it up this time. Really picked it up. She turned it slightly, as if the angle might change what it said. "It still has to be in our system," she said, but her voice lacked the earlier certainty. "Sometimes there's a delay." Nia nodded. "That's why the district told me to come in person, to confirm it posted before the deadline." Margaret turned back to her computer. Her nails clicked faster now, less rhythmically, as she typed Kayla's name again. Then the student ID number. Then something else Nia couldn't see. Margaret frowned. "I don't understand why it didn't populate," she muttered. Nia stayed silent. She'd learned that this was the moment to let people sit with the discrepancy between what they said and what the evidence showed. Margaret clicked into another screen, then another. Her posture shifted forward, shoulders rounding slightly as she leaned closer to the monitor. "Well," she said slowly, "it looks like the request was entered." Nia raised her eyebrows just a fraction. "Entered when?" Margaret didn't answer right away. She squinted at the screen, then scrolled. "It says Thursday," she said. "Mid-morning?" Nia's voice stayed even. "Before Friday at noon." "Yes," Margaret admitted. The word hung there. Margaret cleared her throat. "But approvals sometimes don't finalize until later." "The district approved it Thursday afternoon," Nia said. "I forwarded that email too." Margaret nodded, though she still hadn't looked up. "I see a note here." She paused. "It was flagged for review." "By whom?" Nia asked. Margaret hesitated. "Administration." "Which administration?" Nia pressed. Margaret finally looked up. "The principal." Nia felt a slow heat rise. Not anger, but clarity. So it was in the system. Margaret's jaw tightened. It wasn't processed. "But it existed," Nia said. Margaret leaned back in her chair, exhaling through her nose. "Look, these things happen. There are a lot of moving parts." "My child isn't a moving part," Nia replied. That made Margaret flinch. "I wasn't saying—" "I know what you were saying," Nia interrupted, still calm. "You told me it didn't exist. You told me the window had closed. You told me my daughter had no options." Margaret glanced toward the closed office door down the hall. "I'm not the one who makes the final call." Nia nodded. "Then I'd like to speak to whoever does." Margaret hesitated. "The principal is in meetings." Nia folded her hands on the counter. "Then I'll wait." Margaret studied her for a long moment, measuring persistence the way some people measured inconvenience. Finally, she stood up. "I'll see what I can do." As Margaret disappeared down the hallway, Nia looked down at the timestamp again. 10:14 a.m. Such a small detail. Easy to overlook, easy to dismiss, unless you needed it. And Nia did. Because now the question wasn't whether the transfer existed, it was why someone had decided to pretend it didn't. Margaret returned 10 minutes later, not alone. She walked slightly behind Principal Andrew Collins, a tall white man in his early 50s, suit jacket draped over one arm, expression carefully neutral, the kind of neutrality that suggested he'd already decided this was an inconvenience, not a crisis. "Nia Robinson?" he asked. "Yes," Nia replied. Collins glanced at Margaret, then at the paper still on the counter. "I understand there's some confusion about a transfer request." "There's no confusion," Nia said calmly. "There's a timestamp." Collins picked up the page and skimmed it quickly. "The enrollment window is firm." "And the request was submitted before it closed," Nia replied. "Thursday at 10:14 a.m. Collins nodded once, distracted. "Submission isn't the same as acceptance." "The district approved it," Nia said. "That approval was sent Thursday afternoon." Margaret shifted beside him. "It was flagged for review." Collins shot her a look. "Yes, which means it wasn't finalized." Nia felt the pattern solidify. "So," she said, "the system received it on time, the district approved it, and then someone here stopped it." Collins frowned. "That's not how I'd phrase it." "But it's what happened," Nia replied. Collins folded his arms. "Mrs. Robinson, we have to consider classroom balance, staffing, and capacity." "My daughter was reassigned for safety," Nia said. "That's documented." Collins nodded slowly. "And we accommodated her." "Temporarily," Nia corrected. "This transfer was the permanent solution you recommended." Silence stretched. Margaret looked between them, suddenly very interested in the stack of folders on her desk. Collins cleared his throat. The concern is precedent. If we allow one late transfer... It wasn't late, Nia said, more firmly now. Collins met her eyes. It wasn't completed. Nia took a breath. Then explain why? Collins didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back to the counter and leaned closer to Margaret's computer. Pull up the action log. Margaret hesitated. That's internal. Do it, Collins said. Margaret typed again. This time, slower, more careful. Nia watched the colour drain from her face. There, Margaret said quietly. Collins leaned in. Nia couldn't see the screen, but she didn't need to. She could feel the shift. Collins straightened. The request was opened Thursday morning. And? Nia asked. And it was marked pending at 11:02, Margaret added. And? Nia repeated. Margaret swallowed. It was manually paused. Collins closed his eyes briefly. By who? Nia asked. Margaret's voice dropped. By administrative override. Collins exhaled slowly. Which means me. The words settled heavily in the room. Nia felt her heartbeat steady instead of spike. Why? Collins adjusted his jacket. We had concerns about space. You didn't contact me, Nia said. I intended to, he replied. But you didn't, she said. Collins nodded once, conceding the point. I see that now. Nia folded the confirmation page neatly and slid it back into her folder. So the issue wasn't the deadline, or the system, or the district. No, Collins admitted. The issue was a decision, Nia said, made without telling me. Collins looked at her fully now. Yes. For the first time, the truth was out in the open, not defensive, not softened, just stated, and with it came a realization neither of them could ignore. The timestamp hadn't just proven the request existed, it had shown exactly when and where it had been stopped. And now that moment was no longer invisible. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after that, not the awkward kind of quiet, but the kind that followed a truth finally being said out loud, with nowhere left for it to hide. Principal Collins straightened his jacket and cleared his throat. Given the documentation, he said carefully, and the timing, the transfer should not have been paused. Nia met his eyes. Then it shouldn't stay paused. Margaret sat very still, hands folded tightly on the desk now, no longer typing, no longer explaining. Collins nodded once. Agreed. He turned to the computer. Reinstate the transfer. Effective immediately. Margaret blinked. Today? Yes, Collins said. Update the enrollment status and notify the district. She hesitated just long enough to be noticeable, then began typing. This time, there was no confidence in her movements, only compliance. Nia watched the screen reflect faintly in the glass behind the desk. She didn't smile. She didn't relax yet. She waited. Margaret cleared her throat. It's processing. A few seconds passed. Done, Margaret said quietly. Collins looked at Nia. Your daughter can start here Monday. Nia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, Collins nodded. You were right to come in. I know, Nia replied. Not sharply, not smugly, just truthfully. He accepted that. As Nia gathered her folder, Collins added, We'll also be reviewing how transfer requests are handled going forward. This shouldn't have happened without communication. Nia paused at the counter. It shouldn't have happened at all. Collins met her gaze. You're right. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had earlier. Nia stood for a moment on the front steps, pulling out her phone. She typed a short message. Kayla, it's done. You're starting at the new school. The reply came almost instantly. Really? Nia smiled then. Small, tired, genuine. Really? She looked back once at the front office window. Margaret had already turned back to her computer, the moment filed away as something inconvenient, but resolved. Collins had disappeared down the hallway, but the timestamp still existed. It always would. A small line of text most people ignored until it mattered. And for Nia, it had done exactly what it was supposed to do. It didn't raise its voice, it didn't argue. It simply told the truth about when the system said yes, and who had decided to say no afterward. And because of that, her daughter's future had quietly, firmly shifted back onto the path it was meant to be on.